You're listening to the Save the Date podcast, where we talk all things weddings, jewellery and romance. With love from Cullen Jewellery.
Hello and welcome back to the Save the Date podcast. I'm Sheridan.
And I'm Juliette, and we are so happy you're here.
Guys, we have some sad news today. If you are a Melbourne bride, you might have heard this, but there is a very popular wedding venue in the Yarra Valley called Riverstone Estate. And this is where I got married last year, and lots of people have planned to get married there this year and of course next. And they have just announced that they are closing.
Aww.
Unfortunately, from what I've seen, they were unable to renew their lease.
Oh, right. Okay, so it was a lease thing.
Yeah, so it was of no choice, I guess, of the people who run Riverstone Estate as a wedding venue. But yeah, unfortunately, they're closing. It's very, very sad and very abrupt. So I found out on Monday, which was the 27th, I think, of May. And from what I read on Monday, they were closing as of the 30th of June.
This year?
Yeah.
What? Surely they would have to fulfill the existing bookings.
No.
Is there not some legal obligation to fulfill?
I think because it's not like they didn't get their lease renewed. Like they tried to, but their lease wasn't renewed. Like the people that own the property are able to just say, well, sorry, but
right.
But then I've also seen, and I'm assuming this is possibly just because they're also open to the public, like if you want to go there for lunch or like wine tastings and things, but closed as of this Saturday, the 1st of June.
Yeah, right.
Which is obviously it doesn't actually affect me.
Yeah.
But it is very sad because it's such a beautiful venue, and we had said many times we'll go back there, once a year or so.
Yeah. It's also
lunch.
very quick. It's very quick to announce that and then close.
Yeah.
Because you'd think this sort of thing would be in the works for a while. I don't know. I suppose it depends. If it's a lease thing, maybe it's a little different where you're not giving... Yeah, they don't need to give maybe as much notice for that sort of thing potentially.
I'm not too sure. I'm sure that the owners of the venue have been going back and forth for a while.
Yeah.
I would imagine. And then obviously as soon as it gets set in stone, they've got to make the announcement.
I wonder what they'll do with the property.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Because they'd have all the vineyards if it's a winery or they're making wine.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they'll open their own thing on the land, or if maybe they've got a new tenant
possibly
that's offered to pay more for the space.
Yeah. I'm not too sure if it may open up again in 6 months' time under a new new ownership, new name and everything. But yeah, very, very sad, and obviously lots of couples who are now out of a wedding venue with not long to plan it.
Oh my gosh. Imagine if your wedding was in July, just after the closing, you'd be in panic.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. It's fine. I don't want to stress you out. But realistically, I can see how you'd be in panic mode if I was the bride. Yeah. And they are very validated feelings if that is you.
Yeah. There has been a lot of venues that are nearby in the Yarra Valley that have said, we'll honour the pricing that you've paid. We'll honour your Riverstone contract if we have your date available. I've seen some that have opened up extra dates because obviously some wineries will have blocked out dates where they won't do weddings on certain Saturdays and things like that. But they've basically opened up those dates now so that they can help out more people. But yeah, I just thought a very sad update. But if you are one of those people who has unfortunately had your wedding kind of planning thrown up in the air because of this, we just want to say we are very, very sorry. We certainly wouldn't want to be going through it. but you will get through it.
Yes.
And also I wanted to just quickly recommend, if you're not a part of, there's a Facebook group called Melbourne Brides. If you're not a part of that and you are kind of stressing out, definitely join that group, because they have put on there a lot of information, and there's a lot of like wedding venues and coordinators and things that have put on there, you know, how they're going to be able to help, hopefully be able to help a lot of couples. So
yeah, that's a good tip for people who maybe, even if your situation is slightly different.
Yes.
Another still a really good resource for you. Yeah. Because there's all kinds of vendors on there, even if you have had your makeup artist cancel on you last minute. I guess similar thing.
Yes.
Where it's like you may not know where to turn. So yeah, really good group for finding people last minute.
So in light of that news, we thought we'd stick with the theme of venues, hopefully lighten up the vibe a little bit. But we wanted to talk about venues and give you some insight into what to look for when looking for a wedding venue, and the kind of things that you need to be asking to make sure that it is the right venue for you.
So sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it.
The first thing, as always with anything wedding planning, I guess has to do with your budget. But just make sure, obviously you want your venue to fit into your budget comfortably, and you still have room to be able to do all of the other things you want. But make sure that they are really open with their pricing. There can be some places that will try and hide little costs, hide tax, I think, in the US potentially. And another one to look out for is minimum charges. So most venues will generally have a minimum charge of however much it is, that if you don't meet a certain guest requirement that is going to be per head, you know, say 70 guests. If you've only got 50 guests, you're still paying for 70. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, they've got minimum quotas.
Yeah. So just make sure that they're open with that cost as well, because they might say, you know, it's $150 per head and you've got 30 people, so you're thinking it's going to be, I can't do quick math, sorry, but whatever that would be. Yeah. But the reality is that they have this minimum charge of $20,000, and you know, you might not be anywhere near that. So just kind of think about, like, are you still willing to potentially pay that minimum charge? Yeah. Even though you don't actually meet the minimum head count.
Yeah. And yeah, if they're not offering that information, which they should, don't feel nervous to ask, because these are very valid questions. Because even it can just be little random things. Like even sometimes they'll charge extra for like cake cutting. Yeah. Like they're little random charges that may not be included necessarily like per head. So yeah, ask those questions about everything else.
Yeah. And with that as well, because with minimum charges, sometimes it might be a minimum charge just for like a head count, or sometimes it might be a minimum charge, but you can add things in to kind of reach that minimum. So like you could add in the cake cutting and that will go towards the minimum, if that makes sense. So you're not actually paying that on top of the $20,000 minimum head count.
Yeah. Or even like sometimes your bar tab can be included in that minimum.
Yeah. The next thing is higher fees. So sometimes if your venue has your ceremony and your reception on site, they will have a higher fee for the day, because essentially you might be booking out the venue for a longer period of time, especially if they like do other things other than just weddings. So if, like, for example, it's a winery and they would typically do like a lunch service, they might need to be closing the lunch service early in order to cater for your ceremony being on site. So yeah, is there that higher fee that you need to also pay on top of your reception, catering and things like that? And the other thing to keep in mind with this as well is, if you only want to have your reception on site, is that actually allowed? Or do they only do ceremony and reception because potentially they need to close the site for the day and they can't do a half day. And if they can, we're getting technical. We're getting there, yeah. If they can have just your reception on site, are they potentially still going to charge you that higher fee because they can't then host another wedding?
Yeah.
It's just another one of those kind of nitty-gritty hidden costs that can get quite confusing, but you really want to know this early before you start like putting deposits down and things like that, because you'd just rather know upfront 100% how much you're going to be charged for the actual day.
Yeah. And like all of this should come in writing as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So our next point is, how does it look in photos? So obviously if you're having either your ceremony and reception there or just reception, you're going to be taking your portraits and all your other kind of wedding photos usually on site. I guess this is probably more a thing if you're at a winery and stuff, like less of a thing if you've got more of a city-based or suburban-based venue. Because I know there's one close to us here at InQ in Melbourne, Leonda. Really great wedding venue, but you wouldn't be taking your photos there, for example. But like if you were at a winery, you'd obviously be taking your photos on ground. So if you are taking photos at that venue, just have a look at their socials. Is it the vibe you want? Because it's all well and good if you go to your photographer or pick your photographer and it's like they're the aesthetic and the vibe you want, but they can only do so much if the background isn't matching the vibe you want. You know what I mean? Like if you want that really kind of old vintagey look, but then your venue is really stark and modern, you're not going to really get, there's only so much you can do from the photography point of, perspective. Yeah. So yeah, is it the right vibe?
Yeah. And I think like obviously you can kind of get a bit of an idea off like social media, but if you go to the venue as you're kind of getting a tour around the venue, can you see things that you would go, oh, that would be really great to get a photo in front of that? Oh, I'd love to have that in the background of, a photo. As an example, like would they have potentially mountain views? Do they have vineyards that are actually nice and aesthetically pleasing? And especially with vineyards and those like garden kind of things, think about the time of year that your wedding is going to be as well. Because if your wedding is potentially going to be in autumn and all of the vineyards like are going to be twigs.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. It might not, like you might go there and visit in spring and everything is green and lush and absolutely beautiful. But when your wedding is going to be, it's going to be like not that pretty.
Yeah.
So yeah, think you kind of have to think about those sorts of things as well. And this also kind of goes if you are a vendor, potentially like going to a venue you've never been to before. You want to try and scout out all of these areas so that you're able to take your couple there. Yeah. I think also what you kind of said about like if you have a more suburban venue, obviously, you'll most likely get your photos, your portraits taken off site. But I would also be thinking about like, are there nice areas in this location that could still look nice for photos in case like of wet weather or something like that, which kind of leads us into our next point, which is there a backup plan in case of bad weather? Because obviously if you plan to have an outdoor ceremony, this is incredibly important in case there's going to be wet weather. But it is also important to think about that with your portraits. Because if you've planned for all of your portraits to be at, like the local gardens, if you're getting married at an indoor venue and it's bucketing down with rain on that day, will you still be happy with the photos that you can get indoors at and around your venue?
Yeah.
Because if you absolutely won't be, then you might need to keep looking for a better venue.
A different venue. Yeah. And even like on that same note that like even if it's not necessarily raining in the moment and you get a patch where it's not, it's like you're going to have heels on most likely. Squelching in the grass.
And like with your dress as well.
It'll get quite messy. So it's just all these little things, I suppose. That like you said, make sure the indoor venue is, or you've got other options that are indoors.
Yeah. And then if you're thinking about like option B for just your ceremony, is the backup option like a really kind of terrible option?
Yeah.
And they kind of just have you like in the corner of an awkward room. It's going to be cramped. It's going to be uncomfortable for all of your guests and for yourself, because like realistically, as much as you don't want to think about it raining or it being bad weather on your wedding day, you do kind of need to at least consider it. Because if you won't be at all happy to have option B at your venue, I think you also need to look for another venue.
Yeah.
You want to feel like option B is just as good as option A, just like slightly worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you want to also be in love with option B, because you don't want to look back at, you know, the photos of your ceremony and be like, oh, I hated it so much. Like we were cramped in this awkward room and I just wish that it hadn't been raining. We should have done it on a different day and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you don't want to think that. You want to love both options and be just as happy either way.
Even if your wedding is in summer, I would still just mildly consider this.
Yes.
Just because, I mean, I know definitely here in Melbourne, our weather, even in the peak of summer, it's extremely unpredictable. And I'm sure a lot of other places in the world are the same, where, you could get a random rainy day in the middle of summer and it's just bad luck,
really
I suppose.
Bad luck,
Well, actually, they say rain on your wedding day is lucky. Maybe it is lucky. But again, like, even if you are getting married in summer where you're like, oh, I don't think I need to worry about that, just think about it a little.
Yeah, or even like it might not actually be raining on your wedding day, but if it's been raining the whole week before and your wedding, like where your ceremony is, could get muddy or like just really gross and slippery, like you might still have to have that option B, even though it might be like clear skies and fine weather on your actual day. And
there's also actually, you know what, even if you're really set on a venue that's like indoors and stuff, but the only downside is that they don't have nice photo spots, you can even look into other alternatives of like getting photos done at a different indoor venue. Because like in Melbourne, like I'm pretty sure the State Library, like something like that, it's really kind of aesthetic inside, and they even host events in there. But like I'm sure you could maybe get photos done inside there if just as like another alternative.
Yeah, 100%.
You can explore different options.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that like you need only your venue to be nice, but yeah, definitely look at other options for indoor portrait
as well
locations. Yeah. Next up, you want to know if your venue can be customized. So some venues will have limitations on what they can and can't do in terms of decorating the space, in terms of the layout of the space. And you really want to know this from the get-go. And I think we've spoken about this before, is that this is one of those things that kind of does make wedding planning quite tricky, because you do need to kind of be able to think about the bigger picture of and the end result of how you want your wedding day to look like and how you want your venue to look like at the very end. Right from the beginning. And this might be as simple as like you're envisioning round tables for your reception and the venue only offers square or rectangle tables. And like it might not be something that you would think about initially. You might just go, oh wow, like this space is incredible. You can envision it looking exactly how you want it to, but the reality is that they just can't make it look that way. Yeah, that's like a pretty big one, I think. You'd be able to get, I guess, clues on this based on their social media, because generally they'll have examples, lots of photos of examples and ways that they've had the venue set out in the past. But yeah, it's definitely something that you want to check in with them about. And if they don't have round tables, just as the example, are you able to get someone in with like, you know, get a decorator in to fit out the space for you in the way that you want? Or is that an absolute no-go? Like they only have what they have and that's it is what it is.
Yeah. And I guess on that same note as well, if you're wanting something, not even if it's necessarily, I suppose it's kind of customized, but if you want it, like I know some weddings, you see those big like things on the roof where they can do these like, I don't know what we would call them, not chandeliers, but these, I don't know, designed things that you can put on the roof, or even just these other different floral arrangements. Another question you want to be asking is how or when are you able to enter your space?
Yes.
Because some venues, again, maybe they're doing a breakfast thing or a lunch thing and you're not allowed to set up in your space until 2 p.m. on the day of your wedding, but your florist or your ceiling person, I don't know what they call
Your decorator.
Your decorator. They're like, no, well, actually, it's going to take like 2 hours to set this up, and we're not going to have enough time from when we're allowed to get into the room to when your guests are coming in. So that's another really important thing. Yeah. So it's not just necessarily what the venue can offer you, but it's what time they can offer you the space.
Yeah.
Or even like some things maybe need to be done the night before, and that might not be, you may not be able to do that either. So ask that question too.
The next big question that you want to be asking is, will there be more than one wedding on the day? So I think this is relatively, at least from my experience, relatively uncommon in Melbourne at the very least. But I have heard that in other countries and states, there are multiple venues that will have multiple events on at one time. And this is something that you really need to know, especially if it is potentially going to restrict your access to the venue. Because like we were mentioning before, if you've gone around the venue and scouted out all of these beautiful locations that you want to get your portraits done, but on the day you're actually only allowed, this small little portion of the venue, and everything that you wanted to get photos with is outside of your portion, you're not going to be able to get those photos because the venue isn't going to want, especially if they have more than one wedding on the day, the venue doesn't want you and the other couple
crossing over,
cross paths and get in each other's way. So they're going to do whatever they can to make sure you're completely separate. So yeah, that is like a really, really big one that you want to make sure all the things that you want to be able to get photos with, you're actually able to access on the day. And even with this, you might have full access to the grounds, but it might only be for an hour straight after your ceremony. And then after that, you're limited to your reception space and you're not allowed to go anywhere else. And although that might sound kind of okay, generally speaking, your photographer and your videographer are constantly looking outside and scouting the lighting and scouting locations. And if your photographer and videographer see that the sun is setting perfectly in this one spot, or I've seen something recently about blue hour, which is like the hour after sunset, where the lighting is kind of a bit bluish and looks really pretty. But if your photographer and videographer see that, they're going to want to get photos of you and your partner with that beautiful lighting. And if they can't do that, then like you're potentially missing out on some of what could be your favorite photos. So yeah, another one that like you just really want to know. And if you're okay with there being multiple weddings and you're not worried about it, that's fine. But you need to know that as you're booking, the last thing that you want is to try and go somewhere on the day and you've got their like staff running up to you being like, what are you doing? You can't be here. Get out.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of scramble and run back.
I guess, it's more just knowing about it and knowing your options and just discussing it. Because like, maybe when you book, there's no one else on the day, but then someone might book on the same day 2 months after you. And then you're like, oh, well, I thought you said no one else was on that day. Well, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's any kind of potential that it will be not double booked, but
someone else,
multiple people. The next thing that you want to know is what the venue offers themselves. So some venues will have extra inclusions that you can add on, and this might potentially be cheaper than like actually trying to find someone to hire externally. And this could be things like lawn games that we've spoken about before to be used during cocktail hour. They might have neon signs. They might have a variety of table decorations, napkins. They might have different plates that you can pick from.
Chair decor.
That's a really good one. Yeah. They might have different like chairs on offer for your ceremony. Like they might have benches, they might have white chairs, they might have wooden chairs.
Different types of chairs.
Different types of chairs. I have purse.
I have a purse. I have purse.
But yeah, your venue might have a lot of things that they actually have sitting there and are more than happy for you to make use of on the day. And doing that likely will end up being far, far cheaper than if you were to try and hire that externally, and then you've got to have someone come in and set it all up and do all of that thing, and then also pack it away at the end of the night. Because generally anything that you bring into a venue, you have to get that out of there as soon as the reception is over.
Yep.
Whereas if you're using 90% of their decorations, you don't have to worry about any of it.
No, leave it all there.
It's their backup.
Just make sure no one takes it.
Yes.
Thinking it's on offer.
So with that is kind of leads us into the next tip or thing to know of, which is if they have a day of coordinator, and if they are offering you all of these kinds of things that you can have them set up for you, chances are they will also have a day of coordinator that you can utilize on the day. And that can be like a big lifesaver and also money saver, because you don't then have to organize that yourself or be potentially running around doing all of the setup with, just yourself or your bridesmaids or family members or things like that. So find out if they have a day of coordinator, because if they do, it'll make your life so much easier.
And they also know the venue the best. Well, you'd hope so if they work there. So it could also be a big help in terms of efficiency on the day.
And these are other things as well that like we were saying about your minimum charge. If you haven't met their minimum quota for guests, but you're able to add in their all their decorations, their day of coordinator, that might also kind of bring you up to the minimum that you actually really are getting your money's worth. For what you're paying. So something else to think about. And I would imagine that even if they do have, something to think about as well is that if they do have a day of coordinator, but you are bringing in all of this other stuff, they might not be able to use their day of coordinator to help you out all that much, because that coordinator knows their stuff and works with their things and kind of making sure the day runs as they've planned for it to. But they might not be happy to be accepting all of your other deliveries and, coordinating how the florals need to go up and things like that. They'll just do it for their own things.
Okay, our next one of the most, if not the most important thing, the contract.
Yeah.
Make sure the contract is crystal clear, that everything is stated on it, because I feel like you'd almost be, if something's not on your contract, you'd be entitled to not have it go through in terms of like hidden costs or whatever. If they try and charge you for something extra and it's not on your contract, I feel like you'd have grounds to be like, no.
Oh, yeah.
So little things like that, or even I feel like as well, a big thing with the contract to look out for is like cancellation policy, or if you have to cancel because of unforeseen circumstances, or like things that are out of your control.
Yeah.
Like the COVID weddings, like that sort of thing. What happens? Or like with this venue now that closed down.
Yeah.
They cancelled on them. What's the policy around that.
Yeah. I would be making sure that they have not only a cancellation policy for you, like if you cancel, but do they have a cancellation policy for if they have to cancel on you? Because like I've heard of, I can't remember where I saw it, but there was a venue that basically someone had booked their wedding, and then a couple of months out, the venue said, oh, like, we're so sorry, but something else has come up on that day and we can no longer host your wedding.
Yeah.
Like, what is their policy if something like that comes up? Are you going to get a full refund? Because you absolutely should. But make sure that that is written in your contract, because in the same way that, you know, if they haven't put hidden fees, you can push back on that. If they haven't put in their cancellation fee and they're not willing to refund you the money and there was nothing in their contract, they can push back on you.
Yep.
For that as well. So yeah, as kind of confusing and annoying as it can be to read through a big contract, for something like your venue especially, you really, really want to make sure that you fully understand it. And if there's anything that you don't understand, make sure that they can explain it to you clearly as well.
Yes.
Because yeah, they should fully understand it, even if you don't.
Yes, absolutely. And if there is something in there that you're not happy with, don't be afraid to question it or ask them to be more detailed or add something in, because again, it's your wedding. So you...
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a red flag. If it's something like that, when it comes to the contract, if the venue's being really shady or weird about things that are, what's the word? Not far-fetched, reasonable. If they're being, weird about things that are reasonable requests.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's a bit of a red flag with a venue.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you have asked them to explain something and it kind of is making more sense in the way that they're saying it, ask them to change the wording on the contract, especially if they've kind of said something that doesn't quite line up with the contract. Get them to put it in.
Yes.
Like if the contract says cancellation, refund or something like that, I don't know, I wouldn't obviously say it that simply. And then they say, oh yeah, if we cancel for this reason, you'll get a full refund and it'll be within X amount of time. Make sure that that's what they actually put on the contract, not just full refund.
Yeah, because, that can mean different things.
Yeah, even just those like tiny little wording, different wording things can trip you up if you kind of try and take things further. So we kind of spoke about this a little bit already, but the next thing that you want to know is accessing the venue and any restrictions on accessing the venue. So obviously, like you were saying, Juliette, you need to know this for setting up your decorations. If you're only going to have 2 hours to do it and that doesn't work with your decorator, then you need to try and find a way around that, I guess. Yeah. But the other thing to think about as well is if you're wanting to do like a rehearsal in, you know, the week or the days prior, are you actually able to access the venue to be able to do that? Because there might be some venues that won't be open at all to the public and they have weddings on every single day in the lead up to your wedding. And so you're not able to have a rehearsal there, which, you know, isn't really ideal if that's what you're wanting to do. And also the other thing that you want to know is, are you able to drop things off the day before the wedding? So there might be some things that can go there, you know, before the day so that you're not stressing too much about it, whether it's like welcome signs, menus for the tables, napkins, anything like that that kind of is non-perishable. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to know if you can like just get those things kind of off your hands into the venue so that they are ready as soon as your decorators come in to set everything up.
Yeah. And on that same note as well, like I know it is usually the most common thing is that when you're at the end of the night, you have to take everything out if you've brought stuff like signs yourself. But like if it's some really big things like a big wedding sign or I don't know what else, some sort of big display sort of thing, you can still ask the question if the venue is happy to keep it for you overnight and then you come back the very next morning to pick those bigger things up if you've got something like that. But yeah, I feel like that's a very case by case, like different venues will be different about that kind of stuff because it is quite common that you have to pull everything out at the end of the night.
Yeah.
But some places might.
Yeah, definitely.
If
you have things that you know are going to be really tricky to get rid of, like that night, it's always worth asking the question if you can leave some things there and you'll pick them up, you know. And you can kind of just say, if we don't get there by 10 a.m, you can charge us, but we'll be there at 9.
Yeah, I'll be there.
I will be there. Another thing to think about with this is if your venue has catering, but you've decided not to go with their catering and you want to bring in your own, can your own caterer actually access the kitchens at the venue, or are they not allowed to do that? Because that will increase your pricing with your caterer if they then also have to bring in their own fridges and their own cooking equipment.
Yeah.
Like their own stoves and ovens and things like that. That is going to significantly increase
the
price for your external caterer. So yeah, firstly, you want to know if that is an option. Like, can I bring in an external caterer even though you guys technically do have food on site? And yeah, what is the access actually going to be like for them on the day? Because they'll need to know that as well, obviously.
And then one of the last things as well on this same topic is asking the venue about if there's a noise curfew in the area, because this is actually surprisingly common, where your music may have to be turned off as early as 10 p.m, which for a wedding night is quite early.
Yeah.
And even like a lot of places, I feel like the standard, definitely here in maybe Melbourne, or even like I think Adelaide's the same. I've had a few cousins get married there, where 11:30 is actually the standard for switch off, which again, I would actually say that's kind of early for a wedding or a big party.
Yeah.
Like I myself would want at least 12:31 if, you know, on my wedding night to go to. So yes, definitely something, if that bothers you, definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you want to like have the option to be able to keep going until later. Like the last thing that you want is you've paid, because that's another thing that they might try and kind of sneak into the contract as well, is that you're paying for your reception to go until 12 o'clock, 11:30, 1 o'clock, whatever time it is, but they actually have a noise curfew that is an hour before that time.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're telling your DJ that they have to turn the music off.
Or even just turning it down. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Kills the vibe.
Kills the vibe completely if they have to turn the music down.
Peaking at that time.
Yeah.
Turn it up.
Yeah, you want to have the option to pump the music all the way up rather than down to tea and coffee.
Nothing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Save the Date podcast. We hope you learned something new, and if you're currently planning your wedding, congratulations, good luck, and have fun.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow or subscribe and leave us a review wherever it is that you're listening.
Make sure to come and connect with us on our socials at the Save the Date podcast and join our Facebook group, the Save the Date community. We hope you have a wonderful day or night, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Bye.
Bye.